My God, it's Stone Cold. The Hellraiser is back.
Here we go. Evolution of the Shield.
John Cena versus the Showstopper.
Hulk Hogan and The Rock in the same ring.
You will never take my place at the head of the table.
Undertaker with a Hell's Gate submission. Oh my God! What?
My God, Michaels just kicked Cena's head off.
The Monday Night Wars have come to WrestleMania.
It'll be The Rock. It'll be Austin one-on-one.
Third and five to the Undertaker.
Do you believe in miracles?
The streak is over.
Hey guys, what's going on? And welcome back to Rivalries on the WWE podcast on this Saturday, May 22nd. Yes, Saturday. I am a day late, and I am for sure going to get in trouble from Matt for this, but no, I'm just kidding. But no, just life got away from me this week. Super busy. Crazy times here in Montreal as the summer construction is just completely taken over the city as we know it. And yeah, just completely got away from me. So I'm a day late, but have no fear. I am here. And as you know, the saying goes, better late than never. And in the spirit of trying to keep things lighthearted and joking and having a good time as we head into the summer, as we seem to be approaching, you know, the back end of COVID-19 and trying to creep back towards normalcy in some capacity, I'm going to review a rivalry here that wasn't a blockbuster one, wasn't a main event one, and I don't believe these two ever even had a pay-per-view match, and in fact, I'm pretty confident saying they never did, and that is a comedic rivalry, comedic gold between The Rock and the Hurricane in early 2003, and this rivalry was something that I believe Vince McMahon and creative to this day try and recreate any chance they get. You know, Matt has said it countless times, and I'm sure you guys can see it just by watching the WWE product, that they love comedy. And when they see something even the least bit comedic, they beat that thing to death. And a perfect example is Otis. You know, he was part of a very good tag team, in my opinion, in Heavy Machinery, but he had a little bit of comedy, not overly comedic, but, you know, the gyrating, the dancing, and what happens? They make that his entire gimmick about him shaking his belly. They change his attire so they can emphasize how overweight he is, and then they break up the tag team and pretty much killed the Otis character as we know it. Or as we knew it, rather, as the new character in the Alpha Academy is really nothing like his former self. But when WWE hits comedy properly, it is something special, but it's something you can't really plan. And I think R-Truth is a good example of that, as a guy who just has it and it never feels forced. And every time he is in a bit, he kind of makes it feel authentic, and there's nothing about it that feels forced. And the Hurricane was very similar in that regard back in the early 2000s when he first showed up in WWE. And I will always remember the Royal Rumble, I believe it was Royal Rumble 2002, where he runs into the ring and he tries to set up Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H for a double choke slam. And Stone Cold and Triple H just like look at each other and just like, who the hell is this guy? And then they just proceed to just chuck him over the top of rope with little to no effort. But the Hurricane was kind of like that generation's version of R-Truth, as a guy who just had the knack for comedy. And I think it was almost emphasized in I believe it was 2002 or 2003. It must have been 2002 when he was tagging with Kane and he started using the choke slam. And the Hurricane was a guy who was also a very good wrestler, very good worker. He was also known as Shane Helms, Gregory Helms, so he could back it up with good matches as well. So Hurricane really found his niche on Monday Night Raw in late 2002 and early 2003. So him and The Rock had never really crossed paths because The Rock, as we know, was the first ever draft pick in the first ever WWE draft when Vince McMahon selected him to go to SmackDown following WrestleMania 18. And he had really found a home over there predominantly for the preceding or the succeeding year or so. And obviously, when he became undisputed champion in the summer of 2002, it allowed him to float to Monday Night Raw. But he was almost exclusive to the SmackDown brand following WrestleMania 18. And then when he dropped the belt to Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam 2002, he took a few months off. He came back in January as the Hollywood heel over on SmackDown and had his infamous or famous rematch against Hulk Hogan at No Way Out 2003 in my hometown of Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So with The Rock being the face of SmackDown in a lot of ways, along with like The Undertaker, or Kurt Angle, or Brock Lesnar, or even Hulk Hogan, and even Vince McMahon was pretty much exclusively on SmackDown at this point, watching Monday Night Raw, he was completely an afterthought. Until the Raw that followed No Way Out in February of 2003.
Because I want the spotlight on an even bigger star. In fact, the biggest star in WWE. Oh, hell, the biggest star in the history of this industry. What are they talking about? I don't have a clue. Who could it be?
So, The Rock shows up on Monday Night Raw in Toronto at the Raw directly after No Way Out, after Eric Bischoff brings him over and promotes him as the biggest star the industry has ever seen. And obviously, the night before, a returning Stone Cold Steve Austin had just beat the holy hell out of Eric Bischoff in his return match at No Way Out. And that's why Eric Bischoff was all like bandaged up and had a fat lip while he was doing this promo. And ultimately, we know the reason as to why The Rock came over to Monday Night Raw. It was because this was going to be his last full-time run before he completely made the move to Hollywood, and they wanted one final match between him and Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 19, which would ultimately end up being Stone Cold Steve Austin's last ever match. And then following that, he put over Bill Goldberg at Backlash 2003, and that pretty much was the end of The Rock's full-time run as we know it. But along the way, before we got to Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock ahead of their third and final main event match at a WrestleMania, you had The Rock announced that he had come to Monday Night Raw to actually enter himself into the Battle Royal to become the number one contender for the World Heavyweight Championship, at this time held by Triple H. So, I mean, at the time, it kind of, you would have made a bit of sense of it, but you have to understand Triple H was a full-blown heel at this point, as was The Rock. So I was never really expecting The Rock to win this match. And again, if you were a bit older and were more privy to what was going on behind the scenes in The Rock's life, you would know that he was fast-tracking to becoming a lead man in Hollywood, so putting a world championship on him probably wasn't in the cards. But again, if you're just looking at it strictly through, I guess, kayfabe goggles and you take reality out of it, it was kind of a cool thing that The Rock came over and he was going to go for the World Heavyweight Championship, a belt that he never once won in WWE. Well, he won it when it was the WCW Championship, but when it was rebirthed, for lack of better terms, in the fall of 2002 and dubbed as the World Heavyweight Championship, The Rock never held that. So he announces himself as an entry into the number one contenders match of the Battle Royal to face Triple H at WrestleMania 19 for the World Heavyweight Championship. But before that Battle Royal got underway, The Rock had a special encounter with someone he had never yet come across.
So, yeah, The Rock said, hey, listen, the fact of the matter is this. If Stone Cold Steve Austin doesn't like what The Rock said, then Stone Cold Steve Austin can march his candy ass right there to Nassau Coliseum. The Rock's home away from home, get right in the middle of the ring, and tell The Rock face to face he didn't like it. It's just that simple. It's really easy. You know that, baby. Yeah. That pie ready. All right. And stop bothering me at work. You know that, baby. The lover's going to have to wait till the business is done. Damn, I got a big match tonight. All right, baby. Bye. Stone Cold Steve Austin. Be concerned about Stone Cold.
What the hell is this, King? Uh-oh.
You're dealing with the Stone Cold stuff.
Holy letdown. The Rock. You used to be an idol, an icon, loved by millions and millions. Yet tonight you come out and you trash the people. What's up with that?
Who in the green hell are you? Oh, no, don't answer that. The Rock knows who you are. Oh, yeah, The Rock knows exactly who you are. There's a green shirt, H on your chest, green mask. Oh, you're the Hamburglar. Yeah, you're that cat that works for McDonald's. Go get me a cheeseburger. Go get The Rock a cheeseburger. No ketchup. As a matter of fact, no, don't go nowhere. The Rock knows exactly who you are. Yeah, you're the resident superhero, the Hurricane. The Rock knows who you are, my man. Yeah, don't you ever bust in The Rock's door like that again. You hear? Hey, but what's more importantly than that, The Rock remind you of something. You ain't nothing. You understand that? Every superhero can whip that ass, every single one of them. Every single one of them. Superman, Batman, Aquaman. Oh yeah, Aquaman, the dude that talks to the fish, he'll whip that little candy ass just like that.
Well, I know one superhero who I could definitely beat.
This is a joke. Who?
The Scorpion King.
Oh, no, no. There is no way you can beat the Scorpion King. You know.
Brandon Fraser beat the Scorpion King.
He did not. That was a special effect for the movie, for Christ. The Scorpion King is the most powerful.
One question, Rock. Just one more. Can The Rock fly?
You've been smoking them funny cigarettes. The Rock can fly and whip that candy ass. The Rock.
We're good. Because tonight, the Hurricane is going to send your candy ass flying over the top rope in that Battle Royal.
Oh my god, the chemistry between these two guys, it was just, I don't even know where they had the idea to do this. Well, I guess it's because the Hurricane was just such a crazy character, like no one liked him. He was literally a superhero. And then you had The Rock, who could almost do comedy with a broomstick. So I guess it was a match made in heaven, and you really could not go wrong here. But it was just absolutely hilarious. Like, the fact that he called him the Hamburglar all the time, like that, it still makes me chuckle. And beyond that, the fact that they bring up the Scorpion King, I don't know if you guys ever watched that movie. It was The Rock's first ever role as a main character in a movie, which was a spin-off of The Mummy Returns. And it was a pretty bad movie, all things considered. And he plays on the fact that Brendan Fraser beat him up, the actor. And it was hilarious on so many different levels. Because it wasn't just The Rock or just the Hurricane. It's just like the chemistry between the two. Like, you have The Rock, who's like this over-the-top heel, legitimate Hollywood star, and just this mega charisma. And then the Hurricane, who's literally a superhero. And it was just, I never really thought that they would go anywhere with it. And, in that Battle Royal that night, The Rock eliminated the Hurricane, and then Booker T proceeded to eliminate The Rock, and Booker T went on to become the undisputed number one contender for the World Heavyweight Championship. But I thought this would be the end of it. Quite literally. I thought it was just going to be a one-time thing. We got a little funny segment between The Rock and his locker room with the Hurricane, and that would be the end of it. Because that's typically what most comedy segments are. It rarely does it happen, especially now in WWE, that they, string out these types of comedy-type segments. But the very next week, we got to see another encounter between the two, and once again, Hurricane invading The Rock's locker room.
Where's The Rock's guitar? The Rock has got to soothe his soul. The Rock has got to sing a song. The Rock has got to sing a song, baby. What? Excuse The Rock 1 second.
Holy hypocrite! Just last week, you challenged Stone Cold Steve Austin to meet you face to face. And yet this week, you got Eric Bischoff and his criminal committee doing all your dastardly work. What's up with that?
How long have you been sitting in there? Huh? You been watching The Rock all night long? Walk around here naked? No, don't answer that. No, don't answer that. Tell you what. The Rock's glad you're here. The Rock's glad you're here because I wanted to talk to you. The Rock, he was going to go looking for you. Do you remember last week when you came waltzing in to The Rock's locker? You remember that? Yeah. And you talked about how the Hurricane could just whip the Scorpion King's ass. Yeah, you remember that? And he also talked about how the Hurricane is going to toss The Rock over the top rope. Remember that? Well, if The Rock's memory serves him correctly, it was The Rock that tossed your little hamburger monkey ass right over the top rope. Remember that? Made it with all your friends. You had Grimace and Mayor McCheese, Ronald McDonald, all them. Yeah. Remember that? More importantly than that, when The Rock tossed you over the top rope, he was screaming something. The Rock was screaming something very important in your ear. Do you remember what The Rock was screaming?
I remember you screaming. But it was when Booker T threw your ass over the top rope that you were screaming. Like this.
Don't do that. No, none of that. Hey!
Oh my God. Hamburglar, Mayor McCheese. Oh my God. The fact that he always came back to the McDonald's characters to insult the Hurricane, it was comedic gold. It was hilarious. I watch this back sometimes just when I need a good laugh because of just the chemistry between the two. And at the beginning of that segment where The Rock opens up one of I guess the closets and the Hurricane's sitting in there in the Hurricane pose, and then he jumps out, and oh my God, it was amazing how they just found gold out of nowhere, and it's rare that it happens. And it's the dynamic between these two of The Rock just being that cocky guy and then playing off of the comedic role. I find it almost a similar dynamic to what we're seeing now with Riddle and Randy Orton, except Randy Orton and Riddle are on the same team, but you have The Rock, the super cocky guy, and then you have the Hurricane, who's just this big goof. And it's not entirely the same because Randy Orton isn't trying to make jokes or make fun of Matt Riddle in the way that The Rock is doing to the Hurricane, but it's that kind of dynamic. And what we're seeing now with Riddle and Randy Orton is a good example of just, stumbling kind of ass backwards into comedic gold, and it's working very, very well. And another example of that in modern times, I believe, is AJ Styles. I find AJ Styles one of the low-key funniest wrestlers that they have on television right now. And he's a guy that I don't think he ever at any point actively tries to be funny. But I find, like, the way AJ Styles laughs, especially when he's a heel, like, I'll always remember in the Boneyard match where you think they're wheeling in The Undertaker in a casket, and then AJ Styles just busts the door open and he's laughing. Like, there's something about AJ Styles in a very dry, serious way that I find hilarious. Or when something goes wrong for him, like, I found it hilarious, like, when he tagged in Omos at WrestleMania, and he was, like, calling out shots to Omos from, like, the apron. AJ Styles is another guy who just has that natural comedy about him. But that being said, I don't know if they will ever be able to strike gold like they did with these two. And it ultimately led to a match on Monday Night Raw, which is just crazy to think that The Rock, in his final full-time run in the WWE, had a match on Monday Night Raw with the Hurricane. And in a lot of ways, you could make the case that it was probably the Hurricane's biggest profile match to date, because I guess when he switched to Gregory Helms and he became kind of like the face of the Cruiserweight division, I believe he held that belt for over a year when he switched over to SmackDown. I guess you could find some more important matches there, especially holding a championship and everything. Or when he won the tag team championships with Rosie when he was still the Hurricane. I believe that was in 2004. I always loved that tag team. But the fact that he had a match with The Rock on a Monday Night Raw, like, that's crazy. Like, you would never expect, like a guy of the Hurricane who's strictly there for comedic relief to have a match with arguably one of the best of all time. But you have to remember that while this rivalry was going on, if you want to call it a rivalry, but I guess it was. Hell, I'm doing a review show on my podcast called Rivalries. So while this rivalry was going on, they were still building towards The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin at that WrestleMania. So when The Rock had his match with the Hurricane on Monday Night Raw, it was to be sure that Stone Cold Steve Austin's presence would be felt.
That's a great one. There's a superhero. The DDT in one effort. Nipping right up to his feet. Oh, this amazing third-generation athlete.
Tell me what you see in The Rock's eyes now. What do you think Stone Cold sees in The Rock's eyes right now, JR?
Competitive fire.
See this? What?
The Hurricane. Help. Hurricane won't go away. Hurricane like a rash on The Rock's backside. Just won't go away.
Can you believe this idiot Hurricane is actually going for a choke slam? Yeah, there you go. Come on, Rock. Oh, hey!
Well, with no disqualification here.
The Scorpion King's doing it.
Touch slam! Touch slam! The touch slam! Covering Kid!
How did he go?
Covering Kid! Make yourself famous! Hurricane can...
Come on, Rock.
Hurricane can make it the biggest name in his life! Your leg! Three! Oh, no! How close! A long two count!
It's only two, JR. It's only two.
Only two!
You don't beat a
There's only
superhero like...
one left when there's only two!
Well, you don't beat a superhero that easy. Come on, Rock. Making me look like an idiot. Get up, Rock. You can do it.
The Rock has underestimated the heart and soul of young Hurricane.
I think I did too.
Hurricane set for the ride. Fine busted by the Rock.
Okay, here we go.
And now the momentum against the team.
Now let me talk for a minute, JR. This is what I've been waiting on all night. This is where the millions and millions of the Rock fans, we are about to see the most electrifying move in sports entertainment.
Oh, wait. What? Rock got his Stone Cold.
What the hell?
The Hellraiser is back. The man that will meet the Rock at WrestleMania.
What's he gonna do? Look out, Rock!
Who the hell knows what the rattlesnake's gonna do? We're gonna roll up. A roll up. A roll up. Did he get it? What? Yes. My God. Hurricane. Hurricane. Hurricane.
Hurricane! No way!
Hurricane has beat the Rock.
Impossible!
Austin distracted the Rock.
So, with the help of Stone Cold Steve Austin's distraction, walk into the ring, Hurricane is able to execute the roll-up. As, I mean, if we think back to Roll Up nowadays, where it's just a predetermined thing that we're going to get several of them each and every week on Monday Night Raw, I guess we could kind of roll our eyes. But in this particular instance, I believe that the Roll Up is the proper maneuver here. And it's just crazy that, The Rock's going for the people's elbow, Austin's music hits, rocks the ring, and then Hurricane gets the victory on The Rock, and that's how this rivalry concluded during the Rock's stint with the company as the Hollywood heel. And it closed the book on the rivalry as we knew it at this point. But what I liked about this program and why I wanted to review it, even though it's kind of a more lighthearted rivalry to talk about, I found it hilarious how the WWE always came back to it. And they always seemed to revisit The Rock and the Hurricane, even when it felt like we were completely disconnected from this program. And following The Rock's match with Austin, and then at Backlash when he lost to Goldberg, he went away pretty much for an entire year. Or 11 months, I would say. And he had some sporadic returns here and there. Like, he came back to beat up La Resistance with Mick Foley. He showed up on the highlight reel with Christian and Chris Jericho. But for all intents and purposes, he was gone. But then in March of 2004, he returned to help Mick Foley and set up his WrestleMania 3-on-2 handicap match against Evolution, along with Mick Foley. But the Monday Night Raw before that WrestleMania, The Rock encountered an old foe.
This is your life. Oh, watch out. This is your life. In The Rock's main nemesis, his biggest nemesis. Let me tell you something. You've got a lot of nerve to show your face. A lot of nerve.
Oh, no. Well, maybe it's you who has the nerve. For when last we faced, it was the Hurricane that was victorious.
No, you don't understand. You don't understand. Let The Rock clarify, make it clear. You beat the Scorpion King. You understand that? Yeah, now standing before you, right here, live in Bridgeport, this is The Rock, baby! You hear that? Live, The Rock, now what?
Well, along those lines.
Hold on.
Along those lines, young Rosie and I went to see a sneak preview of Walking Tall. And I must say, it was very, very good. Congratulations.
Oh, cool, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Now, what about you? What do you think?
Actually, he went to get some juji fruits, got lost, ended up in the wrong theater.
I saw Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen.
Anyway, man, I want to say it's good to have you back. And this time on the side of justice, no less. Thank you.
So, obviously, not as funny because The Rock came back as a babyface, but it was still a cool dynamic. Like, I always found it hilarious how, like, you have the shot of The Rock and he's saying, how dare you show your face around here, The Rock's biggest nemesis, and you're expecting it maybe to be Triple H or by some chance Stone Cold Steve Austin, and then the camera pans out wide and the Hurricane's standing there, and he actually ended up calling Rosie Grimace, which is hilarious, which is, I don't know, that always made me laugh. And at this point, like, Rosie was the superhero in training, and he had the acronym on his shirt that's spelled SHIT. And if you guys can spell, you know what I'm talking about. And it was a funny dynamic. They encountered a couple more times upon The Rock's, like, sporadic returns over the course of 2004. But principally, this was the last time they really ever met. And like I said, it wasn't as funny because The Rock was a babyface, so they didn't have that dynamic. And in a lot of ways, The Rock's heel persona was the best version of himself. I guess maybe in like the year 2000 when he was just this mega baby face and just scorching hot, you could make that case. But when he was the Hollywood heel in 2003, it was just great television, great comedy, and it made for an excellent dynamic with Hurricane and Rosie by extension when he came back. But I guess when he dealt with Rosie, he was only a babyface. But still really, really funny. And on a side note, I don't know if you guys know this, but Rosie is actually Roman Reigns' older brother. And I believe he sadly passed away a few years ago. But I'm not sure if any of you knew that. But if you look at Rosie, you see a lot of Roman Reigns. And the resemblance is very, very strong. And kind of sad that they were never able to work in the ring together at the same time. But anyway, guys, that's all I got for you this week on The Rock versus Hurricane. Obviously, more of a lighthearted show, and just to center around, you know, good comedy that WWE has had over the years. And I think you could make the argument that this is one of, if not the best comedic programs that they ever presented. And I'm sure I'm missing some, but off the top of my head, I find it hard for anything to compete with The Rock versus Hurricane. But as always, you can get me on Twitter at ADemarco25. You can get Matt on Twitter at wrestling_audio, or you can email him at realwwepodcast@gmail.com. Anyway, guys, I hope you stay safe, and I will talk to you next week.